Merdeka 118, In-Depth Design Process by Carl Fender. Recently, the Merdeka 118 architect, Carl Fender, talks about the design process of the megatower. The online presentation was held by the Skyscraper Museum, which is based in Manhattan, New York. Without a further ado, let's watch the video.
Just by way of explanation, we were introduced into the world of megatall buildings in 2010 when we were approached by PNB Merdeka Ventures, which was a subsidiary of PNB in Malaysia, and that stands for Permodalan Nasional Berhad, which is a government fund. In fact, I think the largest in Malaysia. And they formed PNB Merdeka Ventures with the primary objective of realising Merdeka 118 under the helmsmanship of CEO Tengku Dato Abdulaziz. And Tengku is still with the project 10 years later, still running it, and we've become very close friends, and it's been a fantastic experience. It always is if you obviously get on well with the client, and personal friendships evolve, which last forever and make the whole process a joy. The building was to be a super tall containing offices for PNB and its subsidiaries, for a Park Hyatt hotel, for a public sky deck, and it was also to have a major retail podium. And as Carol intimated, you may ask why on earth did PNB, with a project of this scale and nature, come down to Australia, given that there's so much expertise around the world in this type of, or in this building typology. It was explained to me later that the board really was looking for someone in their region, and Australia fell firmly into that category. So they knew of Eureka Tower, which you can see on the right, and I don't know, it seemed to give us the right credentials, and we were fortunate enough to gain this commission. When we started, Tengku came to Melbourne to look at our work, and we spent a week just talking about the brief, the process, the key milestones, and importantly, the consultant selection. And in fact, the first consultant meeting was in the top of Eureka, in the sky deck, which we felt was quite appropriate. We received the invitation in 2010, and construction actually started in 2014. A lot of proximity between Kuala Lumpur and Australia. 7-hour flight, not too bad overnight, 3-hour time distance for calls, etc. So it really was quite an easy process in terms of those sort of logistics. The city of KL is just quite remarkable. It's an organic city in the road networks, in the way it's evolved. And as Carol just mentioned earlier, some major buildings have now popped up, as it were. The Petronas or KLCC Tower, the KL Tower, an observation telecommunications tower, TRX recently, and our Merdeka 118 on the right-hand side. I think these are characteristic of Malaysia becoming part of the international development of cities. There's no doubt that these buildings add to the city if they're properly executed, and again, if they have the right uses at ground plane. This is a good photo because it shows you Stadium Merdeka to the bottom of the orange site, which is our site for the tower, and Stadium Negara on the right-hand side. Both designed by Mr. Jukes. Stadium Negara in the early 60s, and Stadium Merdeka, importantly, in 1957. And that's where the Prime Minister, the first Prime Minister, declared independence. And you can see our site wrapping around Stadium Merdeka and towards Stadium Negara. A strange shaped site, but it gave us a lot of opportunity, as it turned out. I need to really talk about the spirit of this place, the genius loci, I suppose. back in the 50s and 60s, this is how it looked. Stadium Nagara in the foreground, Merdeka in the background, and a bit of parkland. And you could see it was the start of a community facility. But now, when we arrived on the scene, there are the two stadiums, but you can see, you can see here, asphalt, excavation, asphalt, which is used for motorbike car parking. This is a really, really important heritage site, and there wasn't any real public facility there. So we were driven by the opportunity of providing a tall tower like this to create a whole new publicly advantaged precinct at the ground level. This is the day 1957 of the Declaration of Independence, a really important moment in the history of Malaysia. And Tunku Abdul Rahman, the then Prime Minister, and his very famous hand salute as he declares independence. This is a very well-liked and well-known photograph, a very important moment for Malaysia. The energy of the place, as well as its heritage importance. We're right next to Chinatown, which is vibrant. It's a tourist attraction. It's got, it's a bit grungy here and there, but it's got that spirit and character that people love when they come to a city like Malaysia or anywhere else in Asia. These sort of environments are pretty rare for us in Australia or perhaps Europe and US. But traffic is a real bugbear. The traffic is just total jams. It's taken me 2 hours sometimes to get from a hotel to airport, which if there was no traffic would take about 20 minutes. And there is a monorail that connects to our site as well, fortunately. So we just go back. When we took this project on, there had been work done previous to PNB ownership of the site. And this was it. Yeah. And you can see from this approach, this sort of approach of using Malaysian Islamic architecture and extruding it from a village campus type of background was, I suppose, to relate to the heritage of the site. But really, it wasn't so much about providing the potentials of, public advantage. You can see the sort of campus layout here. So one of the first things that we had to do really was think about how could we rationalise that? How could we reparcelize the site to allow the type of development that PNB wanted, which was more singular and which provided more landscaping and public amenity. And it also involved getting rid of this particular building here, which was only the main police station. So that took a little bit of interesting convincing, but we got there. And then I was informed that in about 6 weeks after my first meeting, I'd be presenting to the Prime Minister, and I needed to present 6 schemes. So 6 schemes, 6 weeks. All of the architects, we go through this. We tried different schemes, so that didn't horrify me too much. But we did have to think carefully about how we arranged, where we put the building on the site. And the red dot is where we ended up. The red dot enabled us to create an axis down along, right down here through the building, which enabled a really compelling kind of public pedestrian route through the site, through the building, and there, an axis like that. And then that's the project as it evolved. And along that axis to the south down here, you'll see there is a park that was designed by Sasaki out of Boston, a really beautiful water park, a cooling place, and a front door to Stadium Merdeka at last. Then up here is the tower. This is the podium through here with a around 88-metre diameter tessellated self-supporting glass dome, which paid homage to the dome that exists on top of Stadium Nagara. So it started to create quite, for us, a compelling diagram on the site, and it started to work with the way the land could be utilised from there. The community. This building, or actually all of these tall buildings, are powerful drivers. They're buildings that enable infrastructure to happen. They're buildings that enable public space to be formed by the local community. They're buildings that attract population, attract commerce. And so they've got quite a lot of responsibility in ways that are more than just about structural and tall and so on and so forth. This, when I first started on this, I was told by the local traffic engineer that, oh, well, you know, this will need an extension to the subway, the MRT, it will need bridges, it will overpasses, tunnels, etc., etc. I thought he was crazy, actually, but everything that he said happened. And here, there sits one of the key drivers of development in places in Asia, and particularly in this case, in Kuala Lumpur. All of the infrastructure work has happened, and the monorail station, and of course the gardens, which are just 260 metres long by 70 metres wide, a fantastic public amenity cooled by ponds and water mists that can be turned off to create pre-function areas to Stadium Merdeka. So these projects, I think, have a responsibility to find ways to be more than just themselves, to really fund these sort of public advantages. Just a little rendering of down in Sasaki's park, some of the water features and how they relate to our tower. This is the south elevation of the tower. It's a crystalline form. It looks quite sculptural, but actually it wasn't too difficult to extrude. It wasn't torturous. It was just a simple manipulation of the floor plates to create these angled facets. The 6 schemes, yeah, well, we went back to the essentials. So this was really for the presentation of the Prime Minister. We did our crystal on the left, we did a square, a triangle, a cylinder, and on the right, a twisting building, just to cover a range of buildings. In our own sort of processes, we'd come to the view that the diamond on the left-hand side was going to be the most appropriate tower form for this site for a number of reasons. And so the challenge really was in the presentation to take the Prime Minister through all of these and have him agree with us, which fortunately he did. These are the little rapid production models that we used during that meeting with the Prime Minister. Very simple, but they were able to not distract too much, and able for him to focus on basic things like costs and height. And through that process of elimination, we majestically ended up with the project that we wanted. So we had a sculptural and crystalline shape. The way that this building had to fit into the local context, we're inspired by the songket patterns, the Malaysian materials that are threaded with silver thread, and so you have beautiful patterns like this, but the thread through them becomes quite quite lively and interesting. And so our tower, in a way, does the same. The triangular patterns were symbolic to us of the various cultures and religions and social stratas that make that complex but rich and beautiful community of Malaysia. And the structural pathways and folds in the actual body or surface of the tower are pathways that will be lit, the structural pathways or the folding pathways. So Fisher Moran Stone have worked with us on all the lighting programs. And the other thing about this too is that we were very conscious of not wanting to try and go one better than Petronas. The Petronas towers are beautiful towers, and they're crystalline, they're like chandeliers. So the idea of a a simpler building, just to do with sculptural planes, was very appealing to us. And a very different way of using lighting on the building in the evenings. The Petronas Towers and the KL Tower are very crystalline. They're like chandeliers. But this building will be more about pathways of light, which can be tailored or designed for different effect on different occasions. Just while we're on this slide, you can see that the podium is also quite a prismatic shape, which is really the feeling and the composure of the tower coming down into the podium. So often we see quite large buildings sitting on retail boxes which don't have much to do with anything. So it was our intent to try and make the language of the podium seamless and anchoring for the tower. And we have three residential towers, about 60 stories, the tallest, coming out of those podiums. These diagrams just show the geometric form that the building took. The east-west, if you look at that particular elevation, you'll see how it expands as it comes to ground. It spreads its feet and its bulk and anchors the building, and it looks appropriate visually, and it also created a tremendous 30-odd story atrium inside, which helps the flow of the atrium air through the building. And the north elevation, the vertical pathway up the center of the building, is actually where two glass bullet elevators run from ground to the sky deck. They are two-story elevators. The section through the building, you can see on the right, you start to see the belt truss zones. The GFA, there's about just under 300,000 square meters, 87 elevators, 57 of which are in the core of the tower. The rest are transit elevators which connect car parking, etc. There's a few other facts that, facade panels, 18,000, 8 kilometers of facade lighting. Should be quite a light show. If we look at the bottom section of the tower, diagrammatically on the left, the cofferdam is about 100 meters diameter. It was the wall was about 1.7 meters thick, and it was 20 meters deep. And then within the cofferdam, there were 136 2.2 meter diameter piles that went down 60 meters, and they supported a raft 4 meters deep, and actually poured in three sections: the section under the tower, and then the two hemispheres on each side, so that they could be, poured in one go, with very strong and complex joining junctions between those 4 meter rafts. The core is diamond shaped, and it creates a 12 meter lease span, so quite an ideal floor plate for office work. And then 8 mega columns. So, I've noticed this in the other buildings that have been presented earlier, a lot of them. And Les and Sortine were, again, the design engineers on those buildings. And so this follows a similar path, that we have, again, 8 mega columns. They're about 4.4 meters at the base by 3.2 meters. They're huge. They're bigger than a lot of rooms in Melbourne. They're not really going to fall down. They are incredibly strong, incredibly highly reinforced. The steel in them is a wonder. And they are connected to the core by the outriggers, which in turn are junctioned to the mega columns, which in turn pick up the belt trusses around the perimeter of the building, which you can see in this terrific diagram here. The belt trusses then support perimeter columns, and so this structural system actually allows for alternate pathways in the case of structural trauma to the building through some incident or another. The steel is also mind-boggling. This is standing at the top of one of the outriggers. The steel plate on that outrigger is 100 millimeters thick and welded componentry, and it's 3 stories tall. And those belt truss zones then become the transit zones for elevator crossover. And they're a great look into the building, the structure of the building. They're very, very interesting, very, very sculptural, and probably my favourite spaces. The floor plates, the office floor plates are typically around 2,300 square metres GFA, but they expand and contract. So there's a minimum floor plate, there's a maximum floor plate, but they're around 2,300 square metres. The hotel floors, they are 20 per floor, about 16 stories. And the top of the building erodes out to give it a sculptural termination at the top. The office floors, no intermediate columns, but certainly the services, the electrics, the air conditioning, etc., all floor loaded. So that's a very good way of providing comfort in the floors in the offices. The hotel rooms. The hotel was designed by GA Design out of London. There's 16 levels, 250 keys, Park Hyatt. Beautiful, beautiful views around Kuala Lumpur. And the hotel reception's on level 75. So you enter at the ground floor, take the transit elevator up to level 75 where hotel reception is, and then you don't travel down like some of the hotels, which always confuses me and others, but you then travel up to the hotel rooms from there. On the top, levels 116 and 116 mezzanine is the sky deck, voluminous, and again, great views. You arrive on level 115 through the glass observation deck, observation elevators. They travel at 8 meters a square meter, a little bit slow, just to allow you to enjoy 1 minute of riding as you get from ground to the observation deck. And then on top of that is on the mezzanine, that also has outdoor areas. So up at over, like 600 meters or something, you can test the air. The observation deck above is where the thrills are. So stay tuned to that. That should be quite interesting when it's completed. A section just to show you how the sky deck works. It's got restaurants underneath. The elevators on the outside are 2-story. The lower story delivers to the restaurant, and the upper story of the elevators delivers to the sky deck. Now this is going to the bottom of the building. The bottom of the building is all atrium. On the right-hand side, it addresses Jalan Hang Jebat, and on the left-hand side, it addresses Jalan Maharaja Laila via the Sasaki Linear Park. There's 10 minutes the difference between them in heights. The foyer on the right-hand side is separated by a water feature by Fluidity, designed by Fluidity out of LA. But it's one big holistic space. So as you enter the hotel, it's not actually entering the hotel. It's still part of the journey from outside to inside through to the vertical rise to the hotel floor, reception on level 75. And on the left-hand, on the bottom side, commercial lobby, an escalator and stair system takes you to retail and to the former linear park lobby on the left. So this is the drop-off to the building. It has a huge skylight. So as you drop off to go into either the hotel or the commercial, you actually can look up and see the tower above you, get a sense of that place. And then the interiors. Now these were really, really interesting. How do we make the right space? It's hot and humid outside a lot of the time. It can be raining. We wanted to provide a cooling environment, kind of awe-inspiring environment as well, and an environment that was appropriately scaled to the height and presence of the building. And so we were quite we were quite taken by the caves in Malaysia. And these caves have water on the walls, they have planting, they have light cascading down. And so that led us to interiors that are totally cut, as it were, out of stone, out of travertine. And the water features by fluidity on the floor and vertically on the surface of the elevator core, which helps to diffuse the landing and taking off experience in the elevator, all add to this sense of coolness in there. And whilst it's very sculptural, it will always be changing through different light patterns through the skylights. And if we take a walk through the space, you can see that the core of the tower comes down as a crystal, like a stalactite within the cave. And we go up the escalators, we go up either the stairs, and we can go up to the next level, 10 meters up. We can look into the lobbies of the core of the tower. We can drop off to transit elevators to car parking. We can drop off to the retail on the left. You can see in the distance the information desk. As you walk, you're looking up, you look through, again, triangulated skylights that give you a view of the tower above. Looking back at that, and you can see just in the top here, the atrium that is part of the chimney effect that helps the airflow through these spaces. The front information desk here, and now we're on, behind us is the linear park. We call this the Menangko bar, which is the name of a traditional Malaysian hat. This part of it, looking a little bit radioactive here, but that's backlit onyx, and that highlights the information place of the journey. The atrium is quite a robust high space, which on the first belt truss zone, you can actually stand on it and look down into the atrium 30 odd stories below, if you're game enough. And this, again, here is the building from the south. Crystalline, sculptural, simple, and a nice, we thought, respectful counterpoint to the Petronas Towers in the distance and the KL Tower on the left. The podium is quite large. It's about 200 meters long, but it's very perforated. The public can come into this under shelter from the whole way around the perimeter of the podium. So all the red arrows you can see are accessible by the public. And the podium also, if you can see the yellow dotted line, it hangs out over the building. So people can circulate around the perimeter of the building and stay dry if there's one of those often typical Malaysian or Kuala Lumpur downpours, which I've certainly been caught in, as no doubt some of you all have as well at times. So it's about providing a level of comfort and amenity for the pedestrians. Looking down on the podium, the podium is peeled back to form crevices that are filled with gardens. The gardens are for parts of the tower activities, for the residential activities, and parts of the podium actually touch the ground, so that it provides a very interesting pedestrian experience, and it highlights some of the entry points. If we peel that back, we can see a section through the retail at 7 levels. This is the glass tessellated dome in homage to the Dome Stadium Negara. It's a glass dome which allows light to come down into the depths of the retail, and also when you're in the other levels, lower levels of the retail, provide a draw upwards. Once you are in the higher reaches, you can actually see the tower from the retail. The retail, by the way, was planned by Buckens out of Melbourne. And the top deck was just an idea about how we could do something that was quite remarkable up in this space. In this case, this was looking at a forest, a restaurant, a sculpture, and some IT effects. That's still being worked on, but the idea is that that becomes a very, very strong attractor so that people will want to take that vertical journey to the top of the retail. Now, on the eastern side of the tower, the podium lifts its skirt, as it were, to create an indoor-outdoor space for what we call a food street. And that sits opposite Stadium Negara on the right. Stadium Negara is the circle on the bottom of this drawing, will be renovated into a performance space. And Merdeka Place is the outdoor restaurant. And you can see the rhomboid shapes are actually penetrations through which allow trees to go through and light to go down into drop-off areas for the residential and serviced apartments. And there's a little rendering of the sort of ambience of Food Street. Oh, and of course, all the architects watching this will know that our life is architecture. Our thinking about architecture never stops. And so we're better than between dessert and the main course to start looking at design ideas for this food street in our project. And here we have, from underneath the shelter, looking back at Stadium Negara on the right. On the south, on the left-hand side, we have got the entry, the upper podium entry, and this entry here is the entry to the retail. You can see that through the fold here, you can navigate your way around the building under shelter. This little bridge is an experience for the public with respect to the gardens. It's the bridge that actually takes you from the sky deck to the retail podium, to the food and beverage level. It's, as you can see here, crosses over and looks down onto the roof gardens. And here you see the gills, the service gills for all the plant and equipment, and some of the other gardens on the roof. We're now, I'm going to go really fast because I'm running out of time. The wellness centre in the podium for all the people working in the place, the wellness centre with great views outside. Contributions, yes, the building has to be sustainable. It's LEED Platinum. It's got very many ways of making this very sustainable. We have a lot of public infrastructure work that's been done, from tunnels to footbridges to overpasses, etc. And then into construction. In 2015, the excavations started, 100-metre diameter coffer dome. Here we are in 2016, looking down at the piles, ready for the raft slab to be poured. Amazing amount of steel. The bottom steel was, I think, 12 layers of 40-millimetre diameter steel, and here is the building starting to, in 2018, come out of the ground. You can see the scale of that when you look at the excavation equipment. The building starting to be clad. Major pieces of steel engineering structure, and this is the node point at the top of the southern atrium roof, which you can see the scale of when you highlight the people working on it. Gerard van Beek is our project architect that's lived in KL during the construction to coordinate design, enjoying the view, which is quite magnificent. The building taking shape as we look up the northern facade, which has the observation deck elevators. And me. This is not about me. This is to show you how 2 hours on the site affected me. I went on the site many times until COVID. I've come off the site after 2 hours. I'm exhausted. I'm hot. My shirt is absolutely saturated. And it just leads me to paying homage to the workers. There's up to 3,000 workers on this site. They all look a bit strange at me because they're wondering what I'm doing. But 3,000 workers who then properly fed and looked after at break times, having to deal with the logistics of the elevators to take them to and from. We've had 40 million working hours on this site, and to date, there is no, touch wood, there is no major incident or major accident. So, yes, here's to the workers. So that's the end of my talk. Just finishing on the King's view of KL as it rises into the future. You know, Tunku Abdul Rahman, when he declared independence, he talked about a legacy for Malaysia of building on a technological, confident future. And we can see here Malaysia, KL doing that, bringing these amazing, beautiful buildings which regenerate, which give back to the population at ground level, which become markers of place in the site. It's a very organic city. When you see these buildings, it kind of places you, you know where you are. So they have very fundamental roles, but they're very much the image of the city and the character of the city. And just finishing on the list of the consultants that were involved on the design of this tower, and without going through them all, but they're here for the record, I pay particular thanks to GDP, who have been our local executive architects on some of the residential and the retail Podium, and to RSP, who have been our local executive companions on the tower and one of the residential buildings. It's been a pleasure working with them. It's been a fabulous project, and how privileged were we? Thanks, Carol.